The following presentation is on integrating GraphPad with backend systems. And just to be clear, not only is a lot of this work not actually done yet, this is a work in progress, but it's probably beyond the scope of what smaller organizations can do. Integration is actually going to be fairly expensive. There does need to be some configuration done on the GraphPad side. But in addition to that, there needs to be web services, there needs to be IT support, because even if I can send the data up and retrieve the data, those services have to exist, and that's actually a fair amount of work. And so while this is beyond the scope of smaller organizations, for a large company that has a strong business need to be able to take the drawing information and actually process it almost immediately, this is how you would actually do that. So to begin with, the easiest thing to do is actually download information so that forms are pre-populated. And this I did think might be something for a relatively small organization to do, where a salesman or an inspector could see a list of his appointments for the day. He could go to that appointment, bring it up, he would see the customer information, etc. He could actually take that, get turn-by-turn directions from his current location. And then, as I mentioned, go ahead, and if he had to open a form at that point, it would then pre-populate the form with any customer information. And so we can actually see here that basically we've got the new form, we've got the customer location information. It saves him a little bit of typing. Now, that's great. I could set up a web service or a call to a web service and make that very standardized. And so, for example, my thought is to have an integration point and say, okay, I'm going to be passing up a company, user ID, a password. You can input your own URL with your own call, but everything else would be fairly standardized at that point. And so if we go back to the screens that are being brought up, all of these fields, all of these fields would have to conform to the exact naming convention that I used inside GraphPad. However, any additional information, for example, we've got these fields, which are the customer name, address, city, etc., and date and time of the appointment. Any other information could be downloaded as a JSON dictionary, and that JSON dictionary would then, if we opened up a form, we'll open up a blank form, all you would have to do is set your form up so that the field names corresponded with the JSON. So here I'm actually turned the field names on, and I can see these are the field names that I actually use within GraphPad. But if, for example, you wanted additional information, billing address, other customer information that you wanted pre-populated into the form, all you would have to do is make it so that the field inside the form correlated to the field that the data that's being downloaded. GraphPad would take that information, stick it into a dictionary, and then whenever that field was referenced, it would pre-populate the form. Technical people would probably understand what I'm talking about. That may be beyond the scope, but you could actually do that much. So downloading, you could actually make fairly simple. Uploading is going to be quite a bit more difficult. And again, I want to emphasize that some of this isn't done already. But for example, the drawing itself, so if we have a line or something like that, to take that information and try and send it up to a backend server is probably not going to be all that useful. However, information, for example, if we have area calculations, and we'll just kind of do something real quick here, back up a couple of lines. And so this is actually a fairly complicated geometry. What we could do is set up tables, and I'll grab a table that's already been created under scaffolding. And first off, I'm going to kind of zoom in on this table and show how that works. If we go into text mode and I populate a couple of fields, or put in a couple of fields, we'll actually see we have field names associated with the table. The table has a name associated with it. And so when we sent the information back up, it would just be part of a JSON blob. And so essentially we would say table 1 would be, defined, and then the key value pair is associated with, so description 1 value, description 2 value, description 3 value. And we can actually send that back up as JSON and process it as well. And since this is tightly integrated with the drawing engine, and I'm going to delete this table and recreate it again so we can actually see how that works. And go into text mode, turn that off because that's kind of annoying. And as I've shown in other videos, now if we do an area calculation and we associate that, for example, with asphalt fill, you can see how this information could then be passed up. So now it's we've got description 1, we're going to have asphalt. It's 584 square feet for a total cost, and just kind of pass that information up in that form. So along those lines of having data that's captured as part of the drawing, we can have drawing symbols. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some window measurements as an example. And we'll go to another page, bring that up again. You could, for example, have window measurements. You'd have an image associated with the fields of data you needed to collect. You would fill the values into those fields, and then again you'd have this key value pair configuration, which could then easily be uploaded to a backend system and processed. So things that we can capture, we can have mini forms. So for example, as you do a drawing, and I'll take the example which I had with an engineering company where we had bends and elbows and stuff like that. If we bring up their library, you could draw out various different bends. You could create your drawing, create your drawing associated with that. So the engineer could make his drawing. They could drop in a symbol. The symbol would have text fields associated with that. Those text fields would be conformed into key value pairs, which could then be uploaded. And so you'd have both a drawing that you could look at, but then you'd have data that could be loaded into a database and be processed. And really all you'd have to do at that point is just specify what the web service is going to be. From my side, you'd set up your forms so that they have the keys associated with each one of the forms that you wanted to have processed. And then as the field technician filled in the data associated with each one of those fields, you'd have the key value pairs, which could then be processed. And that's really how you would integrate a drawing, or that's my proposal for integrating a drawing, capturing that information, and then sending up to a backend service for processing. So just to reemphasize this, a lot of this is still not done. The application has been architected to capture the data in this fashion, but the ability to turn that into JSON, to associate, particularly with these images right now, these fields don't have field names which automatically increment and get processed based upon the number of symbols you put in. It's not a lot of work, but it's work that still needs to be done before we can actually start the integration process. So that's my presentation. That's how you could integrate the drawing information. You could also take all the images. So for example, if they took a picture and wanted that as part of the presentation that you wanted to then send up, maybe not put into the database, but make it available for people to view. Another option would be to take the information of the drawing, the PDF, the individual images, and wrap those into a zipped file and then upload that zipped file. That's another capability. That would be something you wouldn't be able to process as much through a database. However, it might be useful for people to evaluate in person. That's my presentation. I hope this is of interest. If anyone would like to explore this, please contact me. Otherwise, I will continue working on this as time allows and see how much further I can bring this. Thank you very much.